My family said I was just confused when I told them I am gay. They sent me to a conversion camp, said they'd fix me. 10 years later, I paid to have it shut down. I still remember the night I told my family I'm gay. I was 17, in my bedroom, knees shaking, heart pounding like it wanted to jump out of my chest. My parents sat on the couch just outside my door, waiting, knowing something was coming. I finally blurted it out. Mom, Dad, I'm gay. The silence that followed was deafening. Then my mom sniffled and said, honey, you're just confused. It's a phase. You don't know what you're feeling. My dad just shook his head, looking disappointed, like I had broken something important inside their world. I wanted to scream, to tell them it wasn't confusion. It was me, finally being honest. But I knew better. They weren't ready. 2 weeks later, my life changed forever. They told me about this place, a camp to help kids like me, my mom said. A conversion therapy camp. A place they promised would fix me. I begged them not to send me. I told them it was torture disguised as therapy, that it had ruined so many lives. But their minds were made up. We love you, they said, but we have to help you find the right path. So I went. Because I was 17 and scared and trapped. Because I thought maybe, just maybe, if I could survive it, they'd accept me. The camp was nothing like a summer retreat. It was a prison of silence and shame. We weren't allowed to talk about our feeling, only about sins and temptation. There were lectures about the evils of homosexuality, forced confessions, and worse. Every night, I cried myself to sleep, wondering how my family could think this was okay, how they could believe this abuse would fix me. The counselors used a twisted mix of psychology and religion to break us down. Pray the gay away, they'd say, forcing us to write letters to God begging for forgiveness. Those letters are still burned in my memory and in my heart, but I didn't break. Somewhere deep inside, I held on to who I was, proud, strong, and unashamed. Years passed. I finished high school through a distance program while still trapped at the camp during summers. I lost friends. I lost trust, but I gained a fire. When I finally turned 18, I left that place and never looked back. My family barely spoke to me after that. I became their disappointment, but I was free. I went to college studying law because I wanted to fight for people like me, for those who had no voice. And then I found out the camp was still running, still ruining lives. That's when I decided I was going to shut it down. I used everything I had learned to build a case, gather survivors, and prepare for the biggest lawsuit of my life. The fight wasn't easy. The camp's owners had powerful lawyers, deep pockets, and connection. They called me a troublemaker, said I was trying to destroy their faith-based organization. They sent me threatening letters, tried to intimidate me. But I wasn't alone. Survivors from all over the country joined the fight. Each of their stories was a dagger to the heart of the camp's lies. Months of hearings, media battles, and sleepless nights followed. My name was on every headline, the face of the fight against conversion therapy. Finally, after nearly a decade of pain and struggle, the camp was shut down permanently. But this is just the beginning, because I'm not just fighting for myself anymore. I'm fighting for every kid who's still trapped, for every family stuck in denial, for every voice silenced by hate disguised as love. And I'm not stopping. Even after the lawsuit win, the scars from those years ran deep. Conversion camp wasn't just a place where they tried to change me. It was where they broke me down piece by piece, under the guise of help. I lost count of the days I spent isolated in cold rooms, forced to confess sins I never had, made to repeat mantras about fixing what wasn't broken. The counselors weren't therapists. They were zealots who believed they had a divine mission to erase anyone like me. One night, after a particularly brutal session where they yelled at me for tempting others, I curled up in the corner of my tiny room, clutching a tattered notebook where I'd been secretly writing poems and bits of truth. I remember whispering to myself, I will not be erased. It was the only thing that kept me sane. When I finally got out, my body and spirit were battered, but my mind was sharp. I knew the fight wasn't over. I started researching laws, human rights, and everything I could get my hands on. I devoured cases of survivors who'd gone public, the ways other states dealt with conversion therapy, and the loopholes that let these camps thrive. Law school was a second chance to rewrite my story. I was a little older than most students, with a past that made me feel like an outsider. But every book I opened and every case I studied fueled my drive. I wanted to be the person who not only survived, but could dismantle the system that hurt me. One of my first internships was at a civil rights firm. Walking into that office felt like stepping into a new world. The people there weren't just lawyers. They were activists, fighters, dreamers. I soaked up everything they taught me, from the nitty-gritty of court procedures to how to rally a community around a cause. It was there I met Maya, a fiery advocate for LGBTQ+ youth. She became my mentor and closest friend. We bonded over long nights strategizing how to tackle conversion therapy legally and emotionally supporting each other when the weight of the fight got too heavy. Even with Maya's support, some days were crushing. I'd receive letters from parents begging for help to fix their children, stories from teens still trapped in camp. One particularly heart-wrenching letter was from a girl named Sarah. She wrote about nights spent crying in silence, praying to be normal. I started organizing safe spaces online and in person, connecting survivors who had no voice. We shared stories, strategies, and most importantly, hope. Together, we built a community that refused to stay silent. Meanwhile, my relationship with my family was a roller coaster. My parents, especially my dad, had deeply ingrained beliefs that didn't disappear overnight. For years, holidays and family gatherings were tense, filled with forced smiles and awkward silences when the topic of that camp came up. But my mom surprised me. After attending one of my talks, she started educating herself. She read books, met with LGBTQ+ support groups, camps, and even stood up to my dad when he said things I couldn't stomach anymore. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Work wasn't always easier. Early on, I took on cases that had nothing to do with LGBTQ+ rights, just to prove I could be taken seriously. But deep down, I knew my calling was bigger. When a new case popped up, a young man suing a conversion therapy camp in another state, I jumped at the chance. The case was grueling, with endless legal roadblocks. The opposing lawyers used every trick to dismiss us, but I was relentless. Every deposition, every court hearing was a chance to shine a light on the dark realities of these camps. The media caught wind, and suddenly we had public attention and public support. That case reignited a fire in me. I realized shutting down my own camp wasn't enough. This was systemic. It was everywhere. I began lobbying lawmakers, writing op-eds, speaking at rallies. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every kid who might one day be forced into a camp like mine. The more I spoke out, the more allies I found. Politicians, celebrities, other lawyers. But I also made enemies. Hate mail, threats, and smear campaigns followed me online. The stress was brutal. Some days I wondered if it was worth it. Then I'd get a message from a survivor. "You saved my life." Or from a parent who told me, "Thanks to you, I finally accepted my child." Those messages were fuel. Behind the scenes, I struggled with PTSD. Nightmares of camp, flashbacks of screams, and cold showers haunted me. I started therapy, something I never thought I'd need. It helped me unpack the trauma, understand my worth, and heal. For years, I blamed myself for not being fixed. Therapy taught me that there was nothing wrong with me to fix. The problem was with the system, and I was brave enough to fight it. At one point, I was invited to testify before a Senate committee. Sitting in that room, looking out at lawmakers, I shared my story with trembling hands but a steady voice. I told them about the lies, the pain, and the dangerous therapy that had almost destroyed me. I remember one senator wiping away a tear. Another nodded, clearly moved. It was a turning point, but it wasn't just politics. My personal life blossomed too. I met someone who accepted me completely. My first real relationship that felt like freedom, not fear. For the first time, I knew what love without shame felt like. Still, I kept my guard up. The past was a shadow that never fully disappeared. Meanwhile, media outlets started contacting me for interviews. Documentaries, podcasts, articles. They all wanted to share the story of the girl who beat conversion therapy. I wanted to be careful. I didn't want to be a victim. I was a survivor and a warrior. I used every platform to educate, advocate, and empower. Now, when I think about that scared kid locked in a room, being told she was broken, I'm proud of how far I've come. But I know the fight is far from over. Conversion therapy still exists, still hurts, still ruins lives. And I'm here to keep fighting until every camp is shut down and every child can live freely. Even after years of progress, the hardest battle was still the one at home. My dad never fully accepted me. He'd say things like, "I still love you, but I just don't understand this lifestyle." It was the kind of love that stings because it comes wrapped in judgment and distance. Every holiday felt like walking on a tightrope, trying to be respectful but guarding my heart against old wounds. One Christmas, my dad refused to come to our house when he found out my partner would be there. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. That night, I sat with my partner and cried for the family I wished I had. But I also realized something important. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes, it's the people who show up, who fight for you, who love you unconditionally. My partner became my anchor through it all. They stood beside me during every rally, every court hearing, every public speech. Their belief in me was unwavering, even when I doubted myself. When we finally moved in together, it was the first home I ever truly felt safe in. A place where I could be my full self. No hiding, no apologies. But even as I found love and purpose, the shadow of conversion therapy haunted me. Occasionally, I get calls from survivors still trapped in camp, scared and alone. I couldn't just sit back and watch. I started organizing secret rescue missions, working with local activists to extract teens and connect them with safe shelters. One rescue still haunts. We had to break a young boy out in the dead of night, sneaking him past guards and through back roads. His eyes were full of fear, but also hope. When he finally breathed free air, he hugged me so tight I could feel his pain melt away just a little. Around this time, the media spotlight intensified. My story was everywhere. Interviews, documentaries, even a book deal. It was surreal and sometimes exhausting. I struggled with the spotlight, fearing it might overshadow the real work. But I used the platform strategically, spotlighting legislation that would ban conversion therapy nationwide, sharing survivor stories, and calling out politicians who still supported these camps. One particularly tough moment came when a major conservative politician publicly defended conversion therapy, calling it a religious freedom. I felt rage and despair. How could anyone justify this cruelty? But instead of breaking, I rallied. I organized protests, coordinated letter writing campaigns, and even held a televised debate. The pressure mounted, and slowly, public opinion began to shift. My law firm threw their full weight behind the cause. We took on more cases, representing survivors who had been abused, lied to, and trapped. One case was especially gut-wrenching. A young woman who was forced into the camp after coming out at 16. The camp had destroyed her mental health and relationships. She found us through a support group and trusted me to fight for her. The trial was brutal. The camp's lawyers tried to discredit her, calling her unstable. But her testimony was powerful and raw. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. Even the judge looked visibly moved. We won that case too, and the verdict sent shockwaves through the country. More states followed suit, banning conversion therapy. Still, there were setbacks. Some camps changed their names, rebranded as counseling centers to dodge the law. We had to keep fighting every loophole. Meanwhile, my relationship with my family continued evolving slowly. My mom became a fierce advocate, pushing my dad to open his heart. One day, after years of distance, my dad showed up at my partner's in my home, awkward but genuine. He handed me a small box with a note, trying to understand. Love, Dad. Inside was a photo of us as kids, before everything changed. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was real. That moment with my dad was a crack in the wall I didn't know was still standing so tall. I didn't expect a full apology or anything grand. Just that tiny gesture felt like a seed of hope. But healing wasn't instant. There were awkward dinners, silences filled with unasked questions, and plenty of stumbles. I was still angry, still carrying the weight of those years when they tried to erase me. But I wanted to believe we could move forward. At the same time, the legal battle kept escalating. The camp's owners were desperate. They threw everything at us. Appeals, PR campaigns, smear attempts. They tried to paint me as a disgruntled former camper with a vendetta. Even some conservative media outlets picked up on the story, framing it as an attack on traditional values. But the more they fought, the louder the voices of survivors grew. We built a coalition of activists, lawyers, therapists, and politicians. There was strength in numbers. People who'd lived the nightmare, now standing tall and refusing to be silenced. One of the most powerful moments came during a congressional hearing. I testified alongside survivors, sharing stories of trauma, resilience, and the urgent need for nationwide bans on conversion therapy. It was emotional, exhausting, but necessary. The hearing was covered live, and I remember seeing messages flood my phone from young people, parents, allies, thanking me for speaking up, for giving a voice to those trapped in silence. Meanwhile, my partner was my rock. Through the sleepless nights, the courtroom battles, the family drama, they were there, reminding me why the fight mattered so much. We dreamed of a future where no one else would have to endure what I did. Then came the breakthrough. A landmark federal bill was introduced to outlaw conversion therapy nationwide. I worked closely with lawmakers, sharing legal insights and survivor testimonies. When the bill passed, it felt like a collective victory. But I also knew the fight wasn't over. Laws could be repealed or ignored. So we launched educational campaigns, partnering with schools and mental health organizations to promote acceptance and understanding. Looking back, it's surreal. From the scared kid trapped in that camp, to the lawyer who shut it down, to the activist fighting for change. But there were moments I still wrestled with, like the nights I wondered if my family would ever fully accept me, or if the scars would ever fade. And sometimes, those fears still creep in. But then I remind myself, I am more than their doubts, more than their attempts to fix me. I am proud. I am whole. And I'm determined to make sure no one else faces what I did. Because in the end, love isn't about control or shame. It's about acceptance. And that's the legacy I want to leave.
Gummy Reads!